I'm here with the legendary DJ Greg Wilson. So you've had a massive contribution to the music industry. How do you think it's changed over the years? Because you've been for DJing for quite a while.
Yeah, I started originally way back, 1975, and I stopped for 20 years, so there was like a gap in between. Then I started again in 2003. So the two periods, I mean, the music industry's massively changed, especially in the past 10 years, you know, with the advent of downloads. It's absolutely changed the whole thing around, and I think it's only just kind of finding its feet again now. It's just kind of realizing how to, you know, adapt within this new climate. You know, obviously people just download stuff for themselves, and so they've got to find a way around that, you know, around how do we sell our music, you know, to a generation that's used to basically picking it up for free, you know, in many respects. But, you know, I mean, it's like anything. I mean, that's happened before in the past with things like sheet music, moving into, you know, like records. And, you know, so it'll always adapt and find a different way of doing things.
Yeah, that's true. So you're the pioneer behind Electro Funk. What was the response like in New York?
Well, I mean, basically it was a music that came out of New York in the early 80s. It was really, you know, like dance music back then was pretty much black music. It was, you know, largely it was mainly soul and funk. When we talk about disco in its original term, that's what it was. It was music played in clubs and discotheques. It wasn't a specific genre as such, and the majority of the music played was, as I say, black music. Soul and funk generally, you know, was where it was like back in the 70s. And as it moved into the early 80s, a lot of the black musicians, especially in New York, and the Latino musicians started to gain access to the technology, the drum machines, sequencers, samplers, you know, synths, all these things. And that's really the start, you know, of the electronic music era as we know it. And, you know, fortunately at the time I was in Manchester. I was working at a club called Legend, which I think is 42nd Street these days. It's very different. I went in there once. It looks completely different. I mean, it was an amazing place back then. You know, had one of the best sound systems I'd ever heard in this country, and, you know, incredible light show and everything. And I worked every Wednesday. It was a predominantly black crowd who came in from obviously Manchester areas like Moss Side and Hulme, but also like Birmingham, Sheffield, Leeds, Huddersfield, Bradford, you know, all these different places, different crews came in. And every Wednesday it was just like rammed with queues outside. It was quite phenomenal, really, when you think back to it. And so basically what happened was that during this period, this new music started to come through, and I was like the first to kind of react to that, to you know, like within a club sense. And also at the same time as that, from a UK perspective, mixing was starting to, you know, really make sense because of the equipment, really. I mean, Legend was the first club I worked in that had SL 1200s in this country, and they had 3. And so with this new kind of drum machine based music, and also having the equipment to play it on, you know, I became known for mixing at that point in time as well.
And you're a keen blogger as well. I'd say black music is a lot of your inspiration behind your blog. What other inspirations do you have in your blog, and do you think there's ever a book in the pipeline?
Oh, yeah, I mean, of course, I think that, you know, at some point in time I will get a book done. I mean, I've already written the first draft on it. I did it 10 years ago, but I just haven't had the time, you know, like to basically to get back into it. And I mean, I've never written a book before. It's a whole different arena, and so you've got to kind of comb through. You've got to amend. You've got to add new bits. And so since I did, you know, the bulk of it before I'd started DJing again. So basically, you know, I haven't really found the time since then, you know, to be able to like put it all together and get it finished off and everything. So whenever I can't say when it'll actually happen and when, you know, I'll actually get the time to do that, but it's certainly something I have in mind. The blog in the meantime, you know, allows me to explore different areas of the cultural thing. I mean, it's not, you know, it's not just music. I also write about you know, films and books. I mean, it's more so music, of course, and I think over the last year things have got so busy that I haven't had much time to write apart from, you know, like blogs about like the scene and what's going on, or kind of history of things. Because really, you know, I mean, a lot of the stuff that I'm about is reconnecting. It's about the history and connecting it back, so people have an understanding, especially younger people, of where we're coming from with it. Because I think it's really important to you know, the old maxim, to know the future first, you must know the past. And especially in the UK, a lot of people get confused over the acid house era, and Ibiza, as though that was a starting point, that was a year zero. Whereas really, there was so much that happened before. For example, in Manchester, if you go back into the early '60s, you had like a club called the Twisted Wheel. I think it opened in '63 and closed in '71. I mean, such an influential venue, and it was playing the cutting edge music of the time, which was like the soul and rhythm and blues, and out of that came the Northern Soul scene. It was people digging for rarer records, and so Manchester has a lot to answer for in these respects. So you can imagine, like for somebody to think that it all started in '88 with acid house, you're cutting out, like what is that, 25 years previous? That's a whole history. And it's also to do with there's a particular British fascination with black music that dates back probably to, I'd say it goes back into the Second World War, when the GIs came over from America, especially the black GIs, and brought their music with them, and brought jukeboxes over and played these records, and people started picking up on them, and the whole kind of beat scene with the bands like the Stones and the Yardbirds, Spencer Davis, even like the Beatles were playing a lot of rhythm and blues in the early days and covering, and so a lot of the music that we know, a lot of the like the what we see as like the British lineage of music, you can date it back really to what was happening during the '60s, and the influence being black American music and rock and roll, rhythm and blues, and where it comes from there. So it's this whole linkage of history that comes up to date now. And with regards to the way that I play now and the music I play, which is I'm known for playing like a lot of re-edits and stuff, and what that does is, again, it's drawing from the past, but putting it in a contemporary sense. It enables older music to be brought into a context that fits, these days. It's not a nostalgia thing, because I mean, it's like now I think the guys who are playing, I think at the university, and I'm hearing "I'm Just a Sucker for a Pretty Face," which is a 1983 track. And it's mad that this connection still retains, with the younger generation of people. But in another way, it's not so mad, because it's the quality of the music. It's just good music, and the production values haven't changed massively, in the period that's passed. It's that obviously there's been slight technological changes, but a lot of it was already in place by the early '80s. This is why people were experimenting with the technologies.
Got a big question for you. Okay, what would you say is your favorite disco song of all time?
Oh God, that's like well, I mean, to name one, I mean, one of the great disco tracks to me is a track called Jingo by Candido, which was a cover version of a Santana track, and it goes back to an earlier track as well, and it was a Cuban musician on the Salso label, which was a famous disco label. And why I say that is it was a track that translated through all sorts of different scenes. It was popular commercially, but it was also retained its underground aspect, so tracks like that are very special, because that they always retain that. They're always fresh. They've not been overplayed, so to speak. So, but I mean, I could name many disco records. There's just so many out there.
That's true. What would you say is the strangest song request you've received?
Well, I worked in Norway when I was 18 in 1978. I went over to Norway and worked in the clubs out there. And I remember, this guy kept coming over to me and asking, what did he ask for? Tuborg. He was like, Tuborg. And I'm like, what, Tuborg? And he kept saying to me, I'm thinking, and he's thinking it's the bar, and I'm like DJing away there. So that's probably the strangest, Tuborg.